Radio Santa Fe. I'm Carlene and welcome to Living Santa Fe. Today's guest, Susan Carter. My gosh, she's got all kinds of I got to put my glasses on, Susan, because I can't see anymore. Our show today will be on recovery from addictions. Now, you said you have been recovered.
Well, I'm not recovered, but I am a woman in long-term recovery. I've had 26 years of sobriety. But we don't say recovered because we're always, we're always facing it and always dealing with it. It doesn't just go away, but I'm happy to say I've lived a happy, joyous, and free life for 26 years without alcohol.
Well, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
When did you start drinking?
I started drinking when I was 13.
13.
I was stealing beers out of my parents' refrigerator. And then we had a big trip, I remember it very vividly, down to Acapulco, and I was stealing margaritas out of the blender. And it was at that time that I realized that I wasn't drinking for the taste, I was drinking for the way it made me feel.
For the effect of it.
That's right.
How about drugs?
Never did drugs. Was always a little bit too scared. I knew my dad would whoop me good if that was ever the case. So
what did your parents think? Did they know you were doing this?
They did. Well, I don't know that they knew that when I was 13. But I grew up in an alcoholic family with both generations, multi-generations on both sides of the family. And so they were very familiar with it. My parents quit drinking 10 years before my dad died, and that was the height of my drinking career. And I'm just so sorry today that I know both my parents, never saw me sober.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was tough.
Is there a hereditary connection with drinking?
Very much so. I mean, it's a family disease, and it is very definitely connected to genetics. And I think, when you grow up in a family that's doing drugs and alcohol, you are much more likely to consider that the norm. Much more.
What did you do what made you decide to quit drinking?
I love to say that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Okay.
And I had a young woman who worked for me, and I knew that every day she came in after she went to some kind of meeting, and she was the most happy, friendly, outgoing, pleasant person. And of course, as I was in my drinking, I was like, ugh, can't stand this. And finally, one day, I just asked her what her secret was, and she told me that it was sobriety. And she was actually younger than the legal drinking age, but she knew in high school that it was a problem for her because she grew up in an alcoholic family. And so she quit drinking. And once that happened, I just said, I want to know more about that and how you're living your life now. And I never looked back after that.
Let me ask you something. Today I notice a lot of my friends drink wine, and especially women.
Right.
Women are really into wine, and they're drinking a lot of it.
I know.
But they have an excuse that that's not as bad as straight alcohol. Now, I've drank wine where I got a little tipsy.
Oh, well,
real quick.
I drank a lot of wine where I got a lot of tipsy.
Real quick. And I don't crave it.
Right.
I don't even like it, to be truthful. So I kind of stay away from it. It gives me headaches and I get sick.
Yeah. I wish that had happened to me.
A lot of people say you never get sick when you drink like that.
It's people are wired differently. And I was one of those that I could drink, gosh, it was as if I had a hollow leg. But once I crossed that mark, my legs didn't work. I would pass out. I was a blackout drinker.
Blackouts.
I drove my car, and by the grace of God, I did not hurt anybody or myself. But I drove a lot when I was drinking, and yeah, it's a painful thing to look back and think, you know, truly it was by grace that I didn't hurt somebody.
Now, how did you get involved in this recovery rally?
In the Rally for Recovery?
Rally for Recovery,
So,
which was held last week.
It was last Saturday. It was a joyous day. The Rally for Recovery, it's the 6th annual one that they've had here in Santa Fe. And the whole community comes together. So it's not just people in recovery, but it's people who are looking for resources, possibly for a family member or a loved one. And in addition to that, we had a lot of corporate citizens and, you know, of course, key dignitaries throughout Santa Fe County that actually came. You know, the whole goal and purpose is for people to see what recovery really looks like. People think that if you're an alcoholic or a drug addict or, you know, that it literally only happens to a certain social economic class. They picture it as you're laying in a gutter, you know, with a bottle hanging out of your mouth or whatever. And that's not the case at all. You know, there are no geographical or socioeconomic borders and boundaries to people who drink and drug. So what we try to do, and through events like Rally for Recovery, is to show people what recovery looks like. You know, it's a wonderful thing. And people are living really wonderfully healthy and productive lives once they discover recovery. So how is it that we can intervene earlier, possibly prevent children from getting into drugs and alcohol, and then really coming together as a community to, I love the way Bill White, he calls it a recovery-oriented system of care in a community where everybody in the community embraces recovery. And it's not just those who are facing some kind of addiction or mental health issue. So Rally for Recovery was for both addiction, but also for mental health, because there's a huge correlation between the two, which creates a lot of what we call co-occurring disorders. And, you know, it's to help people understand that there's help out there and there is no shame in asking for that help.
There's a stigma, though.
There is very definitely a stigma. There is. And that is something that I personally am incredibly passionate about. I had the opportunity back in the early 80s of working for the first really international breast cancer organization. I was one of the founding employees. And back in 1982, young people don't remember this, but women who had breast cancer were truly maimed. They would go in for a biopsy. The doctor would come out and tell the family what the diagnosis was. If it was cancer, they removed both breasts, all of their chest cavity, all the lymph nodes under their arms, and then the women hid in shame, and they didn't come out of their homes. So I worked with a woman, Nancy Brinker, whose sister was Susan Komen, who died of breast cancer at a very young age, and her goal was to bring breast cancer out of the shadows into public awareness, you know, and break the stigma and shame and create, more women were dying of breast cancer than warriors we lost in Vietnam in a given year. So it was very important to her. Well, that's what I want to do with addiction and with recovery. I want to bring it out of the shadows because there is no, it's a disease. It's not a moral decision that you're going to pick up a drink. You pick up a drink, it's the very first drink. For me, I'm not normal, so I can't drink just one drink. That sets off a phenomena of craving where I want more and more. So it's a disease, but yet we're still, people don't talk about it. Or
No.
My mother used to say, you know, she doesn't drink. You know, she'd whisper to her friends that I didn't drink. You know, she wasn't okay with you just being open about it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things.
So you've gone through the stigma.
I have.
When you would apply for a job,
Ooh.
and somebody knows that you had an alcohol problem? That was difficult to get the job.
You know, it's interesting that you asked that because I've gone back and forth. Some people say, you know, just to be open about that. I think it really just depends on the employer. And I think you need to do some homework before you decide that you're going to be open about the fact that you're in recovery. Just because of the stigma and shame, you still have some people who are living in fear or thinking that you're not going to be okay on the job. It's very similar to, I know there are some organizations that won't hire people who are overweight because they think they're going to be lazy. You know, it's just that totally misassociation of who we're made up of and who we are. And so it's the stigma and shame, and it carries over into everything that you do.
Now, you say your parents were both alcoholics.
They were.
Were you married?
I have only been married one time.
One time.
Yes.
How did that affect your marriage?
Well, for me, we were both sober, and in recovery. So it was wonderful because when you are present, you know, and you're not under the influence, or you're not feeling false feelings or dramatic and, you know, all kinds of crazy things that you do when you're drinking or drugging, your relationship is much, much deeper. Much deeper. So we had an incredible relationship because that's something that we shared. And the basis of my recovery happens to be a very spiritual basis, and he shared that with me. And we were very close, very, very close because of that.
Now, you've had quite a few jobs. My gosh.
Not really.
Well, yeah, but some pretty impressive things. You worked with Komen, Susan Komen, the breast.
20 years.
And that's a fantastic organization. You were telling me that it's not real as active as it should be in New Mexico.
Yeah, it's not.
And that's odd. I know the American Cancer Society is.
Right, which is a fabulous organization.
Which is a great organization, too. But
we funded a lot of their programs for breast cancer. You know, their Reach to Recovery program and different things that they did. Yes.
Yeah. And now She
incredible.
Recovers.
Yes. So She Recovers. That's my volunteer job, so to speak, and it's in my volunteer capacity, and it's an organization made up of 275,000 women around the globe. We all convene on Facebook, and it's called She Recovers, and then the website is sherecovers.co because it's in Canada. But I went to their very first annual conference, and when I walked in, it was a ballroom filled with 600 women, and it was just as if I was at the very first breast cancer, where we pulled breast cancer survivors together in one room. It was this passionate group of women. Now, these are women, Carlene, that are suffering from drugs, alcohol, body shame, grief, loss, depression, anxiety, postpartum depression. It's women recovering from everything, financial recovery, divorce, I mean, everything. And we come together as women because there's nothing more powerful than women supporting other women.
That's right. It's true.
And it's so powerful to see, and it's just taken off and grown. And we're going to be doing an event hopefully soon here in Santa Fe that we call them Share Circles, and it's groups of women who are on the online platform, but we get together in person, face to face, because again, there's just nothing. It's all about connection. You know, there's a new TED Talk online right now about the opposite of addiction is connection. Well, I think the opposite of separation, which I feel is a lot of the basis for why we isolate, get depressed, blah, 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 we're isolating, we don't have that connection. And it's so powerful. It's palpable when you're with these women and you see how they just support one another through whatever it is. And they don't do small talk. They go straight to the issues.
Straight to the issues.
Really powerful. So I'll be posting that hopefully soon when we're going to try and convene something like that here in Santa Fe.
Okay, now this woman, Chris Wendell,
Yes,
now she started up part of this program.
she did.
I mean, she really made a hit being in Santa Fe quick.
Absolutely.
Because there, to be truthful, there are not many places you can go if you
Right.
need help.
That's right. That
You've
is
got
so
a-
true.
For drugs, I think there's a place up in Taos, but you have to pay a great amount of money to get your kids in there.
Yeah.
So, and then we had RAP. RAP was good,
Right?
but you keep a person in treatment for 2-3 weeks, and then you let them out. They're right back on it again.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I currently now work for the Life Healing Center. I don't know if you know this, but we've been here 30 years.
I know about
in Santa
that.
Fe.
Yes.
And so we're similar to Vista Taos up in Taos that you were talking about. And, treatment is just the first step. It's really to get you stabilized, to get you clear-headed so that you can think and make decisions that are going to be important for the rest of your life. So treatment is a blip on the radar screen. The most important aspect is the aftercare, because when you leave treatment, exactly what you said, it's all about, where you land, the support services that you're accessing, and how you're going to get that support to lead a life of recovery. And so that's why I became a CPSW here in the state of New Mexico, which is a certified peer support worker.
Okay.
We're trained by the state and actually get certified by the state to kind of help those individuals who are going through what we've been through. We have lived experience, and we try to use that lived experience to help them find the resources that they need, whether it's just support and trying to figure out how to go look for a job or how to find housing, which are some of the basics that you need to have if you're going to be successful in recovery. So that's what we do and that was one big focal point of this year's Rally for Recovery. Was we had all the peer support workers that had been certified by the state were in blue vests, so that if anybody needed help, they could come up to any one of us and ask questions.
So they're out there.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
very
they're
definitely.
right out in public,
Yeah,
and
yes.
people can go up to them.
And I
That's
think
amazing.
what's really wonderful is that because we have such a shortage of behavioral health workforce in New Mexico, there's a tremendous shortage. The CPSWs have been able to go into hospitals, agencies, all of this. Their time is actually reimbursed by Medicare. Medicaid, and they have just proven to be a tremendous asset for our struggling agencies and hospitals who don't have time to walk that patient through how to find recovery resources. So the peer can actually go in, visit with them. Let's say they're in detox. Let's say they're in a hospital room, can talk to them, can get them anything that they need to help them get back on their feet. And hopefully expose them to, what recovery looks like, because that's who all of us are, from all walks of life.
That's a great program.
It is.
I noticed you are from Texas.
I am.
You went to TCU.
Did.
And I'm not going to hold that against
I
you.
know, please don't.
I'm kidding.
It's the first thing I changed when I got to New Mexico was my license plate, because everybody was trying to run me off the road.
Yeah, but you bring the money into Santa Fe. That's the greatest thing. I just went to a show at the CCA on Molly Ivins.
Oh, gosh.
Who,
Good old
whether
Molly.
does it make any difference what your politics are?
That's right.
Molly Ivins was a hit in the media world.
She was.
She was an alcoholic.
She was.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I've not seen the movie yet.
Well, don't miss it.
I'm anxious to see how they portrayed that piece of her life.
They came right out with it.
Did they?
Yes, the whole thing was around you know, from the time she came from a very wealthy family, was another thing I didn't know. She had gone to Smith and did all these wonderful things and had this writing ability, and yet why would she become an alcoholic? It was in her family too.
See, that's just it. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason other than, well, there is rhyme and reason if it's hereditary. And like I said, mine was multi-generational on both sides of my family, so I had the gene.
Do you have children?
I do not.
You do not.
But I do have stepchildren.
Okay.
And 2 of them are doing great, and the other one, again, I mentioned their dad was in recovery as well, has been out for several years now on meth, and we don't quite know where he is right now.
On meth.
Yeah.
That's big here in New Mexico.
It's very big. It's very big, and it's hard. It's so hard. I've volunteer too at the jail and work with women in the jail, and you know, when you see what they've grown up with and the trauma that they're having to deal with, you know, if they have the slightest bit of inkling to become an addict, that's a great way to cover up the pain that they're dealing with. So until they get to deal with that underlying trauma and that hole, you know, it's hard. But I think being able to go in and talk to these women and let them know that, you know, even if they have felonies, they can become a CPSW with their lived experience.
Okay. What other, I mean, I'm going to ask you a question. I know what you people are doing. You're doing a fantastic job of getting out to the public. What other resources do we have here in New Mexico? I know we have a great chapter of AA.
Yes, I mean,
we have many things like that, but what other resources?
So there are a lot, but you have to know how to find them. And you know, I say that the Behavioral Health Services Division at New Mexico, you know, for the state, has a fantastic website that has a lot of those resources listed. There are, you know, if you go, there is a place here called the Friendship Club, and they have just about every kind of recovery-oriented support group help. So yes, they have 12-step programs, but they also have things that aren't 12 steps. So like Smart Recovery or Refuge Recovery, which is just now turned to Dharma Recovery, which is based on Buddhist principles. So it's a great convening spot to get more resources right here in Santa Fe. But throughout the state, that state website is very good. It's called networkofcare.org.
Okay.
And there are great resources listed on there.
So there are other things.
Yes.
What about the religious community?
Well, you know,
have they touched on that?
there is a program. I don't know how popular it is here in New Mexico, but it's called Celebrate Recovery, and that is a religious, you know, secular program that is quite popular throughout the United States. I just don't know how popular it is here in New Mexico as much as I do other programs. Like the 12-step programs and things like that.
You know, I learned a little bit about this when I was working for the state. We had for a period of time, a troubled employees program. And of course, I got called up to the front office and said, would you take care of this? And I said, I don't know anything about this.
Oh, wow.
But I said, I'll do what I can.
Sure.
And I had several incidents that came to my attention. And I managed to talk these people into getting into a program in Albuquerque. I don't remember what the name of it was now, but it worked for them, you know, and they were getting ready to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
A couple of them.
That's right.
I had another lady who had a body odor problem, and I had to go down and talk to her. And you know, what do you tell people?
I know, right?
It's hard to. it's hard to get into people's heads. You know, she didn't think she had a problem.
Of course.
You know, and
It's
she
so
did.
hard. I know.
So you run across these things. We had another place up at Embudo. I remember we got a gentleman into the Embudo program, and that was fantastic. Now, I don't think that's in effect anymore.
I don't know if it is or not. I'm not familiar with it.
I think that's out, but that was a great program
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But I admire people that can go out and actually say, "Hey, I've got the same problem you do."
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very, you know, it's while people say it's helpful for the person you're helping, it's just as helpful as it is to me
Oh yeah.
to remember what it was like and that I don't want to go back there. And, you know, and I'm one of those lucky recovering alcoholics that can be around alcohol and I'm not even fazed by it because it's just not something that's in my life anymore.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that continue to struggle and just have to really be selective on where they're going to go and who they're going to hang out with. You know, they say new playgrounds and new playmates.
Oh, you bet. You bet.
So
That
it's
has
a
a
little
lot to
hard to
do
do
with
here
it.
in Santa Fe, though, because it's such a tight, small community.
It is.
So, yeah.
Well, one of the things too, you know, when I was in high school, we didn't see anything. Oh, you'd hear about the boys going out and drinking beer or
Yeah.
something like that, but we didn't have drugs at that point. And alcohol, we just didn't do it, you
Right.
know. And my mom watched me like a hawk, so I couldn't get away with too much.
Yeah.
But, you know, when I got to the university, then I was exposed to drinking.
Yeah.
And it was mostly beer and cheap wine and cheap beer, which is the worst stuff in the world.
Right?
So I didn't see a lot of that. We had no drugs. Then, when I got out and started working, the drugs started coming into the scene. And it was,
Yeah.
you see it, you'd see it all the time.
Right.
It's frightening.
Yes, it is. And, you know, I think that's what you were saying just about, you know, just being in the workplace. Now there's so many wonderful programs that employers do for their employees through the EAP programs, employee assistance programs, and different things like that, that they're willing to help and do whatever they can and then not hold the employee, you know, not do anything that would cause that employee to be discriminated on the job. And that you're seeing more and more of that because, again, stress and anxiety are on a huge rise. And
Oh,
as you
it's
know,
terrible.
here in New Mexico, the suicide rate is
high,
off the
high.
charts.
Yes.
And that's just going to continue to get worse.
Among
because-
young people.
Among young people.
Right.
That's just going to continue to get worse. Because, especially in New Mexico, we don't have the services. We don't have the safety net for all these people that are dealing with it. And so that's something that I also am kind of involved in, trying to build the workforce up so that we can offer these young people more services and get the help that they need early so that they don't, you know, it doesn't ratchet up to where they're taking their own lives or choosing drugs and alcohol to be able to cope with the stress and anxiety. Stress and anxiety is the leading cause of disability in our country right now.
Give me one incident while you were drinking that you can tell me about
Oh my gosh, let's
that really got your eyes open and you knew you had a problem.
Wow. Well, that's a good one. I think probably when I really knew I had a problem was when I had a really good friend in the fur business. I was a journalist at the time. I borrowed a fur, and he coated me in jewelry. And we went to a party because I was covering it for the newspaper I worked for. And they were serving vodka shots on ice with caviar. And I got into the vodka shots. And the next thing I remember is that was the following day. I woke up. I was told that I passed out in the president and chairman of the board of our major hospital in Dallas, Texas, in his lap, and that they had to carry me out of the hotel. And that when my friend took me, I didn't remember the code to my alarm when my gentleman friend took me home. And the police came, and when they walked in the door, they saw him taking off all my jewelry and my furs, and they locked him up. And then I realized, oh my God, I got my friend locked up. I've got police officers, because I wrote the police log that I knew that were there and saw me passed out.
Yeah.
And it was horrible. I had to live with that shame, and it's a lot of shame. And you know, there's nothing worse than shame, because
That's right. That's right.
then you're thinking that you're worthless. And yeah, so I lived in that worthlessness for as long as I could do it, until I started to see people around me in recovery and see how they live their lives. And you know, they say it's attraction, not promotion. And they attracted me to that way of life.
Well, another thing, I had a doctor on the program one time, and she was saying, she's a psychiatric MD, and she said, if you knew what alcohol does to your body, you'd never even try a drink.
Is that right?
And it was Alzheimer's. She was that's her specialty, and that ought to open up anybody's eyes.
Wow. Well, my father had cirrhosis of the liver, and even though he was sober for 10 years before he died, he couldn't fight an infection off that typically anybody healthy with a healthy liver would have been able to fight off without an issue. But unfortunately, he died very suddenly at the age of 54.
Yeah.
So alcohol can do a number on your body.
Well,
It's not good.
one of my good friends who finally joined the Friendship Club, he died, he sobered up, but he died about 10 years later, and it was, his stomach was just extended. Very sad case, sticks in your head.
And I remember my mom had a friend like that when I was growing up. And I remember she had that real distended belly, and she died at a really young age. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. That's why when I see these kids smoking and vaping and all this, I'm like, don't do that. We don't know what it's going to do to you, you know?
Well, they're finding out about vaping now, so I'm glad about that.
Right.
Of course, I smoked. I walked in the house with a cigarette in my hand when I was at the university, and my mother said, "Are you crazy?" She says, "I'm dying of cancer, and you're smoking a cigarette." So that was my thing too.
Right.
I remember going through that, and I finally quit, but it was hard.
I'm telling you.
It was very difficult.
That's tough. I decided not to give both vices up at the same time, because you know, all I have now is food and cussing. So, but I did. About 3 years after I was sober, I decided to quit. But I was smoking again at the age of 13. I was stealing my dad's Bel Air menthols and my mother's Virginia Slims to smoke in the bathroom, and thought they didn't know by stuffing towels, you know, under the door. And they knew full well, you know, what was going on.
Susan, I cannot thank you enough for your presence on this show and for your honesty.
Oh, you're so sweet.
And
thank you.
so where, in the event somebody's watching you today,
Yes.
and they need help, how do they who do they call?
You know, I am, in my current role at Life Healing Center, I am the Director of Business Development, but I'm also the Treatment Placement Specialist for the state. So if somebody calls me and they're looking for help, I can direct them to the resources, or they can certainly, like you've mentioned before, go down to the Friendship Club. There's plenty of, there's so many people down there that are well connected into places. Albuquerque, same thing. There's a vast network. They can go online and, of course, look up any of the 12-step programs, find out where they're located and when meetings are being held around them. And they need to know that they will be so welcome with open arms, because we've all been there. We've all made that long walk down the hallway into those rooms. But that's what we're there for. We always have a hand extended.
I appreciate you coming on the show.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
so much for
And
having
give
me.
my thanks to Chris Waddell, too.
I will. She's a rock star,
That's
as is
what I
Tom
hear.
Stark. Oh my gosh.
We'll have her on sometime, too.
I hope so. She's dynamite.
Okay, and thank you, Santa Fe, for tuning in.
We believe that the healing person needs an environment that surrounds that person with peace and serenity, to actually be able to reflect and to be able to take a break from that very fast lifestyle that we all have. We basically have 4 tracks: post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma and the stress-related disorders. We treat mood disorders, typically it's anxiety, depression. We have also a track that is designed to help those who haven't been diagnosed yet. We have been working on the trauma spectrum and the stress-related disorders for about 30 years. So the cumulative experience of our practitioners actually adds up to hundreds of years.
I think one of the things that makes Life Healing Center really special and unique is that we're located in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is such a sacred place. There's so much history here, so much healing, so much diversity here in this land. And we have access to a number of really very special and highly qualified and professional healers.
This experience at Life Healing Center really provided a foundation which I'm still building on. In all of the things that I learned here in terms of mindfulness, in terms of awareness, in terms of sitting with it and not reacting and try to, I mean, that's what I'm trying to apply, like, on life.
I never thought I could actually feel happy again or smile anymore. I would have been dead had it not been for Life Healing Center.
I'm grateful that I learned this set of tools that I'm continuing to use in my daily life.
We can all push forward and we can all make it through this, no matter how hard it seems, no matter how heavy you're into alcohol or heroin or opiates or, just your regular medications for the day.
That's why I think this place is so different, because that's what we're focusing on, healing the entire person.
At the end of the day, at Life Healing Center, we are lantern holders. We just hold a lantern for the person to find its own way.